In today's video, I'm going to be comparing the Sony ZV-1 to the GoPro HERO11 to find out which camera is the biggest bang for your buck, and all the while showing you guys what fun and interesting different ways I could put these cameras to use. So I did a video comparing these two cameras a little while back, and it did really well. It's got almost 10,000 views. But I hate it. Reason being is because I just sat there and talked about the camera. I didn't actually show you anything. I mean, I did, but I showed like 10 seconds worth in an 8-minute video. So during this entire video, as I'm talking, I'm gonna have footage with either the ZV-1 or the GoPro 11 over top the entire time. That way, while I'm giving you this information, you're able to see what these cameras actually can do. So let me start off with the Sony ZV-1. First of all, I got this camera on February 18th of 2022, I think, and I've been using it for basically every single video ever since then. And I've made a bunch of videos about this camera because I love it. I absolutely love this camera. If you click on this video, you're probably asking yourself, why should I listen to this guy? What does this guy have that any of these other channels that have talked about this camera, what does he have that they don't? I'm gonna just tell you straight up, I've made hundreds and hundreds of videos with this camera, and there's a lot of specific things that people talk about all the time, like shit's 4K, 60 frames per second, you know, crazy stuff, and that people can get super complicated with it, but one of my goals with this video is I don't want to get complicated with it. I simply just want to show you what it does, what it looks like. So about a year and a half ago when I got this camera, the first thing I noticed, like basically right out of the box, was how regular settings, it's cropped in pretty bad, like the lens isn't very wide. And over time I've gotten used to this and I've sort of adapted to it and sort of accepted it. But for a while it was kind of annoying to me, like how cropped in the lens was. But down the line I actually figured out putting it into product showcase mode, one of the big sells for this camera, actually makes the lens a little wider. The only problem here is that when you put it into product showcase mode, yes, the lens gets wider, but you lose that image stabilization. But one of the big reasons I got this camera to begin with was, compared to my Galaxy S21 phone, the audio on this camera, just the onboard microphone, is way better. And truthfully, I didn't even really have to put on an external microphone because it works just fine. Like, the audio's great. If you're just starting out, or if you don't have the funds to acquire a microphone, that's totally okay, because the onboard mic for this camera is as good as you need. It even comes with this little guy, this little windscreen deal right here, that just attaches to your camera, and it's really effective. So I mentioned the product showcase mode, how it's like different than the regular shooting mode. I'm shooting in the product showcase mode right now. What that does is essentially it focuses on whatever I put in front of the screen. So it doesn't have to be a face, it doesn't have to be anything specific or in a specific location. It's just boom, whatever's in front of the screen, boom, whatever's in front. That's for product showcase. So if you're showing off a product, it'll focus on it. I use this feature an awful lot when I'm shooting for my overhead rig, because a lot of times I'm handling something and I want that something to be in focus. And also when I have the camera locked off, it's just sitting on a tripod, sitting still, I'm not holding it or I'm not moving or anything. Then it's really handy to have to shoot this because I can have a wider lens, so I feel like it's a little bit easier to look at, and it's not so crowded on screen. And to the best of my ability, all the footage that I'm putting over top of this video, I'm going to have it labeled what mode I was shooting in, so I would have it regular or product showcase or slow-mo or whatever. And speaking of slow-mo, there is a super high frame rate feature on this camera, which high frame rate just means there's more frames per second, so that you can make a video slow down and it's not super choppy. So the camera automatically switches to a higher frame rate and then slows the stuff down automatically, so you get footage kind of like this. But as far as the ZV-1 goes, it's a really nice little camera that you can put in your pocket. You can have an external mic attached to it. You can put it on a tripod. You can have a lanyard on it. You can do a lot of different things with it. It's very versatile. But when it comes to versatility, not many cameras trump the GoPro. So the GoPro HERO11, I got it in November of 2022, so not quite a year ago. And when I got this camera, it felt like it was a splurge. I don't think I really needed it, or I don't think I knew exactly what I would use it for yet. The number one thing I knew was I was starting to run. I started running every day, and I wanted to document this process because that was a large part of my day-to-day. So I went ahead and got the GoPro HERO11. Very nice, very pretty, very small, compact camera. One of the things I love about the Sony ZV-1 is that it is small. The GoPro HERO11 is even smaller. Whenever I was getting the GoPro, what I think about when I think GoPro is skiing, surfing, something action, high action, like dirt bike, something like that, like super high action activities. And I felt kind of guilty in a way right when I first got it, because I was like, well, I'm not really doing these things? What am I going to use this camera for? And it took me a while to actually come up with uses for this camera. But over time, what I found out was that it's a super duper good camera for anything. I mentioned versatility, and this camera is the essence of versatility. You can shoot something like this, something that's, you know, stationary, whatever, and then you can take it out running, you can take it swimming, you can take it literally pretty much anything you would ever want to do, you could take the GoPro with you. But like I said, this camera shoots really, really pretty video, and actually I was recording a lot of this footage yesterday as of recording this, and what I took for granted how cinematically beautiful this GoPro camera actually is, and how GoPro as a camera has evolved over time. So enough talking about each camera individually. Let's compare. So first we're going to compare the audio. When it comes to GoPros, they're almost perfect in every way, with exception of the audio. And it's not bad. Not bad by any means, especially because you can get media mods and things of that nature, which are just attachments. You can stick a microphone on there, an external mic. You can make it work, right? You can make it have better audio. And even within the camera, you can turn off, I think it's the wind reduction feature, so that slightly less muffles the microphone. The GoPro lacks compared to the ZV-1 in the audio department. And what a lot of people say, actually, and something I totally agree with, is that audio quality is much more important, especially when you're starting out. It's much more important than your video quality. Next up is video quality. Now this is actually closer than you might think. The ZV-1's got some beautiful footage, beautiful cinematic footage, colors, saturation, sharpness, everything is really, really nice. But the GoPro is not to be underestimated. I think I was on a different, I think I had a slightly different stance on this in my last video, kind of like this that I made. I was pretty much like, yeah, ZV-1's got much better quality, nothing else to it. But in shooting this footage yesterday with the GoPro, I was pleasantly surprised by the footage that I got outdoors in natural lighting. Like, I think you have to have a little bit more particular situations for the GoPro camera quality to look really, really nice. But objectively, the video quality, again, the edge goes to the ZV-1. So let's talk about the frame. Out of the box, the ZV-1 is super cropped in. It has a decent image stabilization, but if you want to get rid of that crop, you can switch to product showcase mode, which allows you to have a little bit of a wider shot, but the camera shake is awful. But the GoPro, however, not only does it have a super, super wide lens, but the image stabilization is unmatched. So without question, the width of the lens goes to the GoPro. Okay, now let's talk about image stabilization. The GoPro wins. I don't care. Which camera is easier to use? For this example, I'm just gonna say which one is just overall less complicated, open up the box, and start shooting. I distinctly remember when I got my GoPro 11, I had to unbox it, I had to install updates, I had to do a whole slew of other things. I had to download the app, I had to do this, I had to do that. And while I love the GoPro, that part was really annoying. I just wanted to get my GoPro and shoot. I didn't want to spend 3 hours doing updates, doing news, and just blah, 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 blah. Just want to open the box, get my camera out, and shoot. Which is what I was able to do with the Sony ZV-1. Now the GoPro actually does, like when you're going from off to shooting, does start shooting quicker because you can just boom, hit the shooting button and then it starts shooting like in 2 seconds, right? It's money. The ZV-1 on the other hand, you gotta press the power button first or open out that LCD display, automatically turn itself on, but you still gotta manually press record, which it takes a little bit longer, not much, but I would say with all things considered, ease of use goes to the ZV-1. Now since this is sort of a long-term review, having reviewed it over using it for about a year and a half, when I compare these prices, I'm gonna compare them to what they are in 2023. So the GoPro HERO11 is $400, $399.99, whatever. The ZV-1 on the other hand is $749.99. Same price as it was when it was brand new to my understanding, which kind of sucks because there's a bunch of different new Sony cameras of this specific line that they're new. I don't know if they're much different, to be entirely honest, but they're new nonetheless. So I would think that this older model's price would go down a little bit, but it hasn't, which is kind of lame. If you're on a budget, I would say the GoPro is where you should look first. I would say pretty much no matter what type of videos you make, battery life is something that it would be extremely important. You want to make sure your camera batteries are going to last a decent amount of time. So which camera between the ZV-1 and the GoPro 11 has the best battery life? That's a much more complicated and more loaded question than you might think. The GoPro shoots like 18 different things. Like you can get the hyper view, you can get the slightly less wide angle, you can get the wide, you can get the linear, and you can get the linear plus horizon lock. So there's a lot of different features, and there's so many more that I haven't even mentioned. Each slightly more complicated feature uses up a little bit more of your battery. So it doesn't take quite as long for the battery to die if you're shooting a time lapse as opposed to if you're just shooting regular video. But with all of that said, regardless, say if you're just shooting regular video on the GoPro or regular video on the ZV-1, realistically speaking, the ZV-1 battery only lasts you about an hour of recording time in 4K. And obviously that would depend. Like if you just turn both cameras on, let them record until they die, the ZV-1 will die first. Now I haven't tested this, but I've used these cameras both enough to know that, hey, that's gonna happen. So when it comes to battery life, the GoPro wins out. Now there are definitely ways in the ZV-1, I'm not sure as much about the GoPro, but I know that in the ZV-1 you can like adjust your brightness, adjust certain settings that allow you to sort of conserve your battery a little bit more. But even still, with all of that into place, it's not gonna last as long as the GoPro. It's just not. So I think when comparing these cameras, one of the big things to take into consideration is what you actually do with your camera. Do you predominantly take pictures? Would you rather take it out on a vacation with you, on adventures? Do you do sit-down videos? Do you do vlogs? Do you do, like, what kind of videos, what kind of movies do you make? Obviously, in a perfect world, if everyone could afford it, I would say 100% get both. But if not, according to this comparison on these particular criteria, I would say get the GoPro. While it was a close comparison, the GoPro edged out over on some certainly important things. Like, they both shoot 4K, pretty much every camera now does. But the stabilization's better, the microphone's a little and all the shortcomings that were with the GoPro really just aren't really that big of a deal. Unless that's something that is extremely important to you, that's objectively not really that big of a deal, because if you're saving like almost 300 bucks on this camera, but it does everything that this can do and more, I see that as an absolute win. But at the end of the day, you know, I'd be talking about all these cameras, I'd be talking about the ZV-1, I'd be talking about the GoPro, like, I talk about all these things and comparing them to each other, but the reality of the situation is, it doesn't matter what camera you have. You can get the best of the best, the most expensive, most fancy, amazing camera you could ever think of. But, what footage you get can only be as good as your ability to get said footage. If you don't practice, if you don't take time and repetitions to develop your skills in filmmaking, in photography, in whatever, if you don't take that care and take that time and understand that right when you start, you're gonna suck regardless, so getting a big fancy camera is probably not worth it. If you understand that it's gonna suck at first, you're gonna not be as good, but over time you'll develop skills to where you'll start to get some really, really cool footage. That was terrifying. So the point here is, it doesn't matter. Get whatever camera you want for your own unique situation within your budget, and then just have fun and shoot what you want. Obviously, shoot as much as you can. Practice, 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 because when you're making videos, do the very best with what you have. And then over time, if you feel like you want to upgrade something, go for it. But at the end of the day, the camera you use is only going to be as good as the knowledge you have of using it. As long as you are fulfilling that creative itch that you have to make videos or to take pictures or whatever, that is what matters, number one, above everything.